Welcome to February 2025 block of the month. And this month we're going to be doing a Dresden block with a cool pieced churn dash block in the center of it. So to get started, we're going to make the churn dash block first. And what I have done to begin is I've drawn diagonal lines on the back side or the wrong side of two white pieces, and I'm going to pair those with the gold square. So I'm just going to line those up, and then I'm going to stitch on both sides of that drawn line. Okay, and then while I'm at the machine, I'm also going to piece together these little rectangular units. And it's a red to a white, and we're just going to stitch along that long side 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, let's go trim and press. The first thing I'm going to do here is go ahead and cut on that drawn line of those two white yellow units that we're making half square triangles. So I'm going to just cut right on that. And this is in your seam allowance, so you could just use scissors to cut that apart. Okay, and then I am going to set those seams, and then with my fingers I'm just going to roll back the yellow fabric onto itself there and press that flat. Okay, and then these are oversized, so we're going to trim them down. That's my favorite way to make half square triangles. I feel like you get the best result making them a little bit bigger and trimming them. And then one more. Okay, so I'm gonna let those cool for a little bit, and then I'm going to press these triangle units. I'm gonna set my seam, and then I'm gonna fold that red fabric back, kind of finger press it, and then give that a nice press. So the seam is going towards the red. Okay, we'll set those aside. And now that we have our units are a little bit cool to trim down, and so I'm just using a block lock ruler, and I'm going to position it so that I have a little bit that I can trim. I can trim all 4 sides, or I can just trim 2 sides. And I'm going to try just trimming 2 sides because I think it looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to cut off this dog-eared part here so that we're just trimming off a very tiny little bit. So that one's ready. And then I'm going to just repeat that for the rest of the units. And if it works best to cut around all 4 sides, you know, just do whatever gives you the best unit, the unit that is the most square, because we definitely want those seams where that diagonal line on that seam is exactly in the corner. That's what's going to make our block turn out the best. So let's go piece it together. Again, I have my design board here with my pieces, and I'm going to lay them out exactly how the block is going to be sewn together. We want to make sure we have all of our pieces oriented correctly. Okay, so we have the yellows all pointing into the center, and then the red is touching the white center all the way around. So now we can just assemble this as an eye patch. So I'm going to sew these together and then add this and then join those 2 rows. Okay, I'm gonna go press these and then we'll sew them into rows. Okay, I've got the pressing done, and what I did on the top and bottom rows, I pressed towards the middle block here where the red and white rectangles are pieced together on both of those, and then on the center I pressed towards the red so that when I join them, those seams are gonna nest then. And so then I'm just going to line that up. Okay, so I've got that one, and then I'm just going to add this one next. Okay, it looks like that. Then I'm going to give it a good press, and then we've got a little bit of another step to do with this block. Okay, when I pressed those, I just went towards the top row and towards the bottom row. I just pressed them out. Now, this is a good place where you could press these open. They'll just lay a little bit flatter because we have all these seams in there. But this one seemed to be okay, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And then our last step is to add on the 2 side borders and then a top and bottom border, and then this will make our block a little bit larger so that we can turn it into an applique circle. So I'm just going to add the sides. Okay, I'm going to press those out, and then I'll add the top and bottom. Okay, I'm going to give that a press, and then our block is pieced. Okay, now I have the pieced block underneath my interfacing, and the pieced block is right side up. And on my interfacing, I have drawn a 9-inch circle, and I've kind of marked where the centers are, just so I can help get it oriented onto my block. So I'm just gonna kind of move it around. You can take a ruler, and I'm lining it from the half of the circles here, and I can see that it is coming across centered. I have a little bit more than 1.5 inches on each side, so that looks centered that way. And then I can do the same along the vertical edge, and I'm centered there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Another point of reference is the corners. Just make sure you've got the same distance from the corner point to your drawn line. That's another way to kind of get it centered. And then when you have it where you want it, we're going to go ahead and just pin that in place. And so I'm just pinning so that the head of my pin is the inside of my block, so that I'm going to do a straight stitch around here on that drawn line, and then I don't have to remove my pins as I'm going. They're not going to be in the way of the presser foot or my stitching, so I can just leave them in there and then not worry about my interfacing shifting. So that looks pretty good. So then we're ready to go ahead, and we're going to do just a straight stitch exactly on that drawn 9-inch circle. Okay, I'm at the sewing machine, and I am going to get ready to stitch the circle onto the pieced block. And I have, first of all, I've just kind of decreased my stitch length. I like a tiny little stitch length. I'm also going to start where I'm just holding, making sure my thread tails are off. I don't want a jumbled, nest or anything on the bottom. And I'm not going to back stitch or anything. I'll just stitch around, and I will, when I get to the part where I've started, I'm just going to overlap it by about 1/2 inch. And that will lock it into place. Okay, and then I'm just going to clip that thread, and then I have that, it is now stitched, the interfacing is stitched onto the front part of my block. And so I'm going to remove the pins, and then I'm just going to go ahead and trim around the edge. I'm going to be trimming outside of the circle 1/4 inch away from that drawn line where I've just stitched. That's going to just give me my seam allowance. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be inside the block, but we're going to give this a trim. Okay, and then we can just discard that. And then I'm going to pinch the center part of the interfacing so that it is pulled away from the block. And then I'm going to just snip a couple little stitches in there just to give me a hole that I can now turn it right sides out. So I'm just going to very gently flip that block, so now it's going to be on the outside part, and I'm just kind of going around with my fingers and just making sure that it's all kind of flattened out. So I'm just pushing out, I'm pushing from the fabric side underneath that seam, just so that it's a little bit stronger there. If you're just pushing on the interfacing, it might not be quite as strong and you don't want to poke through or anything. And so I'm just going to kind of keep just smoothing it and rolling that seam a little bit, just so that I have a nice circular shape. And when I get it to where I think that it looks pretty good, then I'll take it to the ironing area and give it a nice press. Okay, I've got my applique or my circle here ready to go. I am going to take a point turner, and I like this bladed edge, kind of like the hair marker edge, and I'm going to put that in the hole in my interfacing, and I'm going to push it out, but I'm putting it between the seam allowance and the front of the block. So I'm pushing where there's all fabric. I am not pushing where it's just the interfacing. Again, I don't want to push through that. So this, I'm just going to kind of work my way around, just making sure that it's a smooth circle shape. Again, I'm between that seam allowance and the front of the block. So just pushing on all that fabric, and I'm going to go all the way around, making sure everything's laying nice and flat. Okay, that looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and just press that. Okay, and then I'm happy with that circle shape. And now we're going to add that to our Dresden block.